One to another episode of Behind the Build. Today we have with us Russell Fromm, who is the VP of Deployment for Hexagon Wireless, and we have Joe Petrungaro, who is a network infrastructure engineer with over 11 years of industry experience. So without further ado, this episode may be a little bit different in structure. It's going to be a bit more all-in style banter, I would say. But without further ado, Russ and Joe, glad to have you guys on here. If you guys want to just maybe introduce yourselves as well for quick 2 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll jump right in. So really what I've been very excited in watching this space for quite a while, for about a little over a decade, just because I worked in the industry before Verizon Wireless and spent a lot of time volunteering on podcasts and jumping into different calls to kind of explain what the traditional industry looks like. And I got so excited when I finally saw, hey, there's a future here. We can actually change the industry. We can finally break the hold of the big telecoms and kind of go forward with that new DY dream we had of saying, okay, we've got ubiquitous, affordable connectivity everywhere and everyone can be a part of it. It was always very, very exciting. It's something that I wanted to be a part of. And I've just been, either volunteering, joining organizations. Really, I spend a lot of time connecting people and helping people who just need like, why don't you talk to Who Loves Burrito, or why doesn't this project talk to that project, or why don't we work together? So what I spend a lot of time doing, as well as prospecting kind of traditional ISPs who are like, hey, would you like to make just a little extra, dip your toe into DePIN, or as I say it, just diversify your revenue streams, which sounds great to everybody. But that's a high level summary of background on where I'm at. Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn or on Twitter for more about my background and thoughts on things. But I'll give Joe a shot here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us, Sean, Steve. A pleasure to be with you. My name's Joe. You may know me as Network Bits on YouTube or Twitter. I am begrudgingly a crypto YouTuber, but other than that, been a network engineer 11 years. Worked a lot in the wireless space, both in military communications and in the managed services arena, where I've done large Wi-Fi 6 deployments for probably some of the ballrooms and convention centers you may have stayed at over many years. And crypto and blockchain advocate. With my platform, I like to explain more of the technical side of things and really dive into this whole idea we have as to building, some may call it DePIN, but the decentralized physical networks, or even the decentralized wireless portion of it. And I involved in some projects in the space that I'm a fan of, as well as supporting others, bringing, as Russ said, resources and connections. And the ones I really like, I like to buy the hardware or do it yourself, and take part in that community. So XNET is certainly one of those. I'm really happy to see this network progressing. I've had my eyes on it for probably 8 or 9 months now, and see the way things have developed has been positive and reassuring. So thanks for having us here.
Right on. It's great to see you guys. Russ, you and I go way back, having worked very closely for the last almost 2 years at this point. So it's good to see your face in this context. And Joe as well, have known you for quite some time. You guys are a wealth of knowledge, both in the traditional wireless infrastructure industries, from both mobile networks to like large managed Wi-Fi systems. And that's, those are both directions DePIN and XNET is going, right? This heterogeneous network, HetNet idea with XNET, where we can utilize both, starting with CBRS and moving into Wi-Fi is a direction we're going. I'm just curious what, you've been watching, maybe Joe, you start off, you've been watching XNET for a while. What's your, I don't know, what appeals to you about XNET specifically? What's your vibe? Like, what do you like about it? What can we do better? Like, how's this going for you?
Yeah, the one aspect in particular that I like is it's very targeted as far as roaming partnerships and geolocation, and coming up with a design methodology. example given the gold, silver hexes in particular locations for that targeted geographic area and I guess audience that is almost assumed will be roaming onto the XNET service. That is something I've always advocated for in the space. When I've seen others in the CBRS arena, were kind of putting up cells anywhere, just and earning rewards for it. Never made sense to have something that was non-contiguous to me. So that I think is, I would say, in our industry, maybe common sense, I would think, but we've seen other people do it otherwise. So I think that's one particular piece that I like of it.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. I think 2023 is like a year of geo targeting. Like this is actually direction that a lot of projects are headed. Anything with a real physical, like a real estate type of angle, and there's a number of them at this point, and they're all evolving. They're all making directional shifts towards the geo targeting and location specific bounties and bonuses. So like the idea is catching on, even though I think you make the point that it's actually kind of an obvious idea. Like, but I think XNET was the first to go out on a limb and just do it as a baseline. So I'm happy to see the direction, and it makes sense because that's the real value is only going to be created with a little more thoughtful approach.
And there's a counterpoint to be made that I'm sure we'll discuss, down the line as far as this whole decentralized service offering, alternative to your local carrier. But I think this is a phenomenal starting ground, and that's probably leading to some of the coming success that's hearsay as of right now, but we're very hopeful for. I'll pass it to us.
Yeah, I take a little different approach here. I like to hear what other projects say about the space and kind of see what's different, because no one is the same. No one's a clone project. It doesn't exist. And I think that we're rapidly evolving in this industry. We're moving very quickly. And I think we're ready on our second generation of really innovation here. The first generation has come in, proved a model that worked. Now we have the second generation coming in and saying, here's what we need to change. And one thing is targeting specific areas that need coverage and making sure that they're incentivized properly. That is now taken off in the space. And we're starting to see some other changes as well. A big focus too on having good service, saying that you need to have a good core is starting to become more and more acceptable, and saying, you need to be able to support services that people expect. It should be very fluid. That's really gained a lot of acceptance this year as well. And partnerships. This seems to be the year, as predicted, that a lot more talk about license spectrum is coming up amongst multiple projects. There's a lot of talk about carrier partnerships amongst multiple projects. I've talked to multiple projects about doing passing and having core audits by mobile carriers. So a lot of exciting news has been coming in. And I've actually been extremely, impressed lately about some of the core audits, some of the equipment that was used. It's actually the exact same equipment that I worked on, like Ericsson Mobile Core back at Verizon Wireless. What they ran is what they still run today. Now it's mostly Cisco owns a lot of the mobile core equipment. In 4G, it was called Packet Gateway, Serving Gateway, some of the original core. Now they've got updated names for 5G nomenclature, but it's very similar. And and as we all know, the real technology we're using all those radios is technically 4G. It's 5G, compatible, and we'll have 5G radios one day. But right now, to keep things affordable and have a rock solid network, it's best to focus on what's reachable by deployers in the space. Another thing that I think doesn't get mentioned a lot is that there are a lot of industry people, much older, much more experienced, and I'll say much more executively seasoned than myself in the space that we've seen come in various investment groups and deployment groups. And they're very, very quiet. I'd say they're almost stealthily deploying in areas that make sense. I think we can, kind of agree that XNET's areas are really focused on, really urban cores. We're expecting a lot of demand from roaming traffic. One thing that I'd like to mention too about roaming traffic, I think people really underestimate how much roaming traffic and the opportunity that's there. It's incredible. Just having one major MNO partner opens up all their other roaming relationships around the world. So let's say you just get one agreement, with T-Mobile. I'll just pull them up. Not that I know of anything with them. I'm just using them as an example. Just one with them and with their partnerships, and say you'll roam anything on their network, maybe do it more affordably. That might open up 500 other networks around the world, just having them, and then it starts to expand on there. So I've been hearing some very, very good things about roaming agreements. So as you know, as it's public now, Carrier One has done that in Canada. It sounds like it's done very well, and they want to bring that to the United States, which is very exciting. So, and it has a very kind of comparable, I think, vision, to what XNET has. Although they have a very different focus, I think, than urban, strictly urban coverage, which is why I'm very excited to see them expand nationwide. And I think there's been also a lot of talk amongst multiple projects about expansion nationwide. I don't know if it'll happen this year, but I think next year is probably when that'll probably get more legs on it as we get more and more projects getting friendly. But that's enough, I think, to talk about cellular.
Yeah. XNET, we're big fans of Carrier One. I think they understand the problem extremely well, have a great approach to it. Russ, you talk about like this bar being raised, the bar in terms of level of sophistication, the equipment's getting better, the core's getting better, the experience level's getting better. And I wonder like how you guys view this dichotomy where there's one side of these sort of DePIN projects that has a perspective that unless people can participate in these projects in a completely idle, frictionless, passive way, like it's not going to work. Versus you've got the complete other side of the spectrum, which is like, no, the level of sophistication is high and it's getting higher in order to succeed and do it well. Like, how do you balance that out in the context of DY? And I guess maybe more broadly into DePIN as a segment. So like, it's like, the pros versus the complete passive participation.
I think there's one more segment to close your statement there, Steve. It's also like, I guess just the environment, right? Like I think when DePIN started, we're in ZIRP, zero interest rate policies.
True.
The money printer was running, so it wasn't like your ROI was basically instant, and now it's like everything's dead. So it's like,
macro conditions are a huge dominating factor over the overall like temperature of the environment as well. It changes like project timing in a big way. Yeah. I don't know who wants to take a Russ or Joe. Whoever wants to jump in.
Oh man, I'm aching to jump in just because we've seen such a huge drop in the values of cellular radios just this year, and a lot of people in a down market are like, "What's my ROI? Where am I going to make money? How fast is this radio going to pay off?" In general, I like to use about a 1 year, which is very fairly aggressive, but in most cases you just can't do it. You're looking at 18 months or longer. It's very hard to get that. In the space right now. And even if you do get that, let's say, can you actually, let's say you get some amount of tokens through a project, are you actually able to realize that or pay that out? Most likely not all of it. So you definitely got to hold stuff and have some faith in the project that you're working on, that it's all going to work out very well. But I know this, so I can just say that I get texts from manufacturers and suppliers saying, hey, you want to buy some equipment, you want to get some radios, want to get some antennas, want to put them up, because they know that I've got deployment deals coming up that I need to figure out how to cover. And I'm like, absolutely, I would love to buy from you. Will you match Moken's pricing? And then they all get real quiet because nobody can sell under cost and make any money in this environment. So that's been really shocking. I don't think anyone predicted how quickly it's actually right now, in my opinion, just this week, we're now at the point where used 430s, used buy sells 430s or 430Hs as they're most commonly known, used are worth about as much as buy sells 227s, about $200. It's crazy how quickly they've fallen. And I remember 227s that were going for $1,200. Remember 430s going for $1,500. We've just seen that this really rapid decline in the value of these radios. And it's gotten so fast. I know that I've tried to talk to other deployers and people selling equipment. It's been so fast. A lot of them are still in shock and are still looking for deals where they don't sell because they don't want to take that huge loss. They're like, can I move it to another spot? Can I get into an XNET Gold Hex, for example? or silver hexes. So locations have held their value still very well, but equipment has just been obliterated, unless it's very high-end equipment. So I would say, so on the high end would probably be the buy sells 436s, as well as the blink units have held their value, I think, very well this year, and will likely continue to hold their value quite well. As very powerful, very high-end units. I would say we don't have uniformity between all the projects. The closest thing would probably be the 436 Qs from buy cells. Is the most common radio all the projects like and like to use, because they're the highest power you can get. But the blinks are pretty good as well, but they're not universally supported through all the projects. They're pretty close. I would say they're a very close second as far as in the market. So that's really been my shock. I expected radios to go down, but not free fall from going down to used value. We're talking like a third to a quarter of the value starting the year. It's been pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I think we're at this dump moment for the low, sort of the entry level gear. Like it's just firmly being dumped on the market.
It's kind of a function of probably like, obviously this makes sense, but like end user demand, right? And like what the device is actually capable of. Maybe people are starting to realize that like you can't just put 430s like on balconies and expect to roam meaningful traffic, even if it's in an urban area. So
yeah,
could be that.
My take on the question a little bit different of an angle, but typically when there's a higher barrier to entry, as I think one of you alluded to, there's a more sophisticated individual who gravitates towards these type of projects. It kind of keeps like the when Lambo crowd away, the ones who expect the easy early returns, and brings people who have the dedication, belief, the interest in the project, and are more engaged over the time with the community. They want to see a meaningful solution built rather than just an easy return. So that's what I think, the higher price tag, along with the more sophisticated understanding of these kinds of networks, what I'm at least hoping we'll see the outcome being as far as a robust and engaged community that has interests both short-term, long-term on seeing this through and staying engaged when it comes to governance or deployment or any sort of expansion features, etc.
Right. I think I was making this point to Russ like last week. In bubbly times, the exact wrong approach is to take a sophisticated long time horizon approach. Like it's do things stupid and move quickly is the best approach in a bubbly time. So, your level of reward should be commensurate with your level of effort and sophistication input. And when those things are grossly misaligned, you get bizarre behavior. And so, I think XNET is a return to this notion where it's got to be built right. You've got to put some level of effort and be in the right location with the right type of quality of equipment. And then that's how the most value is delivered. So I like to see a back to realignment, which is a little different from the whole like totally passive mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like two sides of this coin, right? You can have, like HiveMapper as an example of a totally passive thing. Like they've done a great job of stripping all level of passive engagement into the collection process, which is the best experience possible. And that's how they're going to scale. I think XNET is a little bit different. Like it's got to appeal to a more sophisticated, a more able crowd. But at the same time, you get this awesome law of large numbers. If you can strike that balance to get mass appeal, then you can excite a large number of people who have access to a large number of locations, and so on. So there's a balance. There's definitely a balance.
Yeah, my concern in the blockchain crypto arena is always too easy to attract the wrong audience.
Yeah,
and get an unintentional result. So having that barrier or kind of self-filtration process, or like for HiveMapper, they have an excellent quality assurance process that they can have anyone contributing, but if they're not doing it in a proper fashion, now they even get alerted. as of their most recent update, which is phenomenal. But when you don't need everyone participating, you only need a few people who give it the absolute all and have to have every last detail on point. Then yeah, I don't see the need to, and just in general, be um, to appear open to all and appealing to all.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I just think it's been good with Hivemapper showing execution matters. Everyone was afraid that market would be rapidly commoditized, that Google would come in with a mapping up, with a Google Maps update. We've seen other projects comes in like Natix and try to get there, say, okay, we can give you rewards for driving as well. And a lot of other, projects starting to come out of stealth saying, hey, that works. But instead it's actually validated that the market, has traction and that there is value to what they're finding. The real-time alerts, I think it is better than what you'll find in other competing projects. You're seeing, right there immediately, not just there's a slowdown on Google Maps, but an actual picture. Okay, this is what it actually looks like on site. I'm actually, excited about that space as well, because there's been several other apps starting to develop to actually help the kind of user report real-time news, where they're actually telling people, hey, go out and film a video and upload it, get paid for it. I'm waiting for them to kind of jump on a Hivemapper-ish model.
Well, I think this is an excellent transition into a more sort of related topic, but it comes down to, does every DePIN project or crypto project necessarily have to be decentralized? Like, what barrier of decentralization does it need to hit? And in the networking realm, I can't believe that it's all, the end result is always going to end up with the, on par with, say, Bitcoin, because networks evolve. They need tuning, they need maintenance. There's going to be additions over time, no matter what it is. But with something like Hivemapper, I wouldn't call it decentralized. Obviously, there's no Web3 infrastructure as of right now that's going to support that compute load that they have. Yeah. Of course, it's going to be hosted in something like AWS. That's fine. Their metrics for earning are tuned based on their improvement proposals, which aren't really taken for a vote right now. But those metrics for how much you earn per area are based on the demand that is requested of the team at the given, at that given time. So even with those two factors, you really can't call it necessarily a decentralized project. Like I said, there's really little governance that encompasses the entire community, which is something that they've been having talks about. But I think Hivemapper is a tremendous project. I actually have met the team out in San Francisco. I was out there, and the CEO, he sits out in a cubicle with the rest of the team, and they're very collaborative. No working from home, and they're actively engaged, and they share a lot of interesting ideas with each other openly, and kind of go back and forth in those debates. So it's interesting to see from that standpoint. And they don't operate like a crypto frat house. They operate like a company. That's probably the best indicator, or at least for me, what I would bet success on. See that it doesn't have to be 100% decentralized. It just has to, in end result, provide a good product and make the community who's contributing happy. And I think they're doing a fantastic job of that thus far.
Agree. Ariel's he's a fanatic. He's a total mapping fanatic. Yeah. He's a great follow on Twitter. I love his content. Speaking about decentralization, I don't view it, the lens into which I view that question in this context of DePIN is not one of like who controls the keys. It's more like a permission to participate. So I think it's a hallmark of a good decentralized project is you can participate without asking permission. You can do it however style you like, when and wherever you like. And you don't need login keys, and you can't necessarily get banned, right? There's just other control measures in place to prevent spam or malicious behavior. So there's permissionless aspect to it, but I also see it as like, it's like this, it's like community-driven projects are not new, right? They're as old as the internet, and they predate the internet. I think to take a great analogy is Helium and the Things Network. Both ostensibly do something very similar, which is create this open, accessible, LoRaWAN network. However, one struck onto this economic model that probably 100x or 1,000x the level of reach and scale in a much quicker time. So it was like both very community driven, but one happened upon this crypto coordination model, and it was this opportunity to scale 1,000-fold. And so I think it's going to be rinse and repeat. So it's like, take any sort of community grassroots idea, add this like much better coordination mechanism on top of it, and it like spans the entire planet instantaneously, and it gets a lot more people involved. So I think that's how it's going to continue to look. I think the spirit will always be like a community-driven project, but certain facets will have to get litigated in the courts, and it'll be country dependent, and there's still a ton of open questions about how these things look from a legal perspective. I think we'll get to eventual conclusion, but
I like the way you put that in the very beginning. That made a lot of sense.
Yeah. There's a ton of dash cam related data, image collection things, right? And I haven't seen a lot of great comparisons of the reach and the scale and the velocity, but I'm 99% sure like HiveMapper is doing loops around them in much, instead of doing it for years, they've been doing it for months, and they're already doing loops. So like any idea can, in the community driven sense, can be improved with a better coordination scheme. So, but the real decentralized is like, it's like a little fuzzy. We're not doing real consensus, right? We're not ordering transactions in a block, right? That's really where decentralization I think factors in the most importantly.
The biggest, to your point about the consensus, I understand what you're saying. I think the biggest, obstruction to being completely decentralized is that utility management. So in any wireless project's case, it's measuring how much coverage is being made available, usable coverage, and what are all the mechanisms that an end user is going to utilize to cheat the system and earn an unfair amount of rewards that can be applied to any project in crypto. It can even be applied to they may not earn more from, for example, it was in one of the, it was a DePIN project, but a decentralized compute project, I won't name which, but killing the load running on that device, even though it didn't net them more tokens, they don't have to host another application on their piece of equipment. That may result in maybe less electricity usage, less internet usage. There's always going to be nefarious players, and one of the things I've come to believe, and rightly or wrongly, we'll see, but my belief now ahead of dealing with any sort of gaming of systems, any cheating, is that if it's not being dealt with immediately, you abuse it and you show everyone else how to abuse it publicly. So that levels the playing field, but that forces the developers to have to deal with the problem at hand. If they're not going to address it immediately in best of intentions, then everyone should be allowed to abuse it. And that's how I intend on approaching further situations with projects I'm involved with. And I don't take pleasure in saying that, But it seems like there's, after some of the issues we've seen with numerous DePIN projects, that's the only way. That's the only way that will get the point across when you have even people on the inside gaming the system.
Yeah, great point. I think unaddressed gaming vectors, either you address them by making them an open secret, or you squash them. If they go unaddressed, it's a hallmark of a project which is not on good stable footing, and it may not be around for much longer.
Yeah, it indicates, obviously the most obvious unaddressed issues are typically indicating some sort of, I guess, intentions of exploitation from the inside is what I've come to believe. Because every time there were issues that weren't dealt with, it turns out someone on the inside was also utilizing them. And it's almost like, if everyone's doing it, you're kind of the sucker not to. And
Right.
I've never gamed the system, just to make the point.
I was about to say.
In the future, I will, and I will do it openly and show everyone else how to do it.
Well, I think that's a great point. I'm actually surprised. Maybe this is something that we'll see more of. In the cybersecurity world, this is well known as bug bounties. Basically, giving someone recognition and possibly even compensation for publicly saying, I broke whatever, I got into it or got data I'm not supposed to. Here's how I did it. I will keep it anonymous. You have 90 days to fix it, or I go public with it. This is like we don't really have a gaming disclosure process in the space, and I think we really should have some type of quorum for people to openly report and get credit for finding flaws in the system. I know many people who found many flaws across networks, and it's just, who knows what they'll get. It may get ignored. It may get fixed right away. It may get fixed in a year. Maybe that'll happen. We'll see.
That's a cool tremendous idea. Yeah, I think it could honestly, like, you could structure some sort of DAO around that and literally kind of operate within. I think some people are trying to do that, but if you maybe specifically focus on gaming, because I always ask the question, like, in all these DePIN networks so far, imagine if there's zero gaming. Obviously there are chances to game, but imagine if no one took advantage of those. Like, where would the network have ended up?
Yeah, exactly. But it's almost like a necessity that
is. It's like checks and balances almost.
That's the whole. That's basically what brings us to what ended up being Bitcoin, and then the other layer ones with their respective consensus mechanism, but making a type of network, a blockchain that can't be altered, that's resistant to those types of attacks. So now comes the second phase, doing the utility-based measurement of whatever is being provided as far as a service, and measuring it accurately without allowing those vectors to be exploited. So I'm seeing some very interesting solutions to that out in the DUI space.
I think kind of what Russ said, it's like the solutions probably exist, but again, you probably have to motivate them to be executed. So some sort of bounty program, or
there is an obvious solution, which is no incentive, right? That's the obvious. That's maybe not the optimal, but it is the obvious solution. And your incentive is you get paid for performing like a valuable service, right? That's the ultimate incentive. And so I think this is spectrum, right? The more heavy-handed your incentive design is, and you can go all the way, these front-loaded emission, right, is the most magnet for a gaming vector. But ultimately, if DePIN, if a project can collectively, through this ability to reach the mass in a permissionless participation manner, and create like novel value just from that alone, and give people a new tool to generate an income stream through skillful deployment and construction, that's the best incentive. But that doesn't always get you there. So you have to conjure up some other interesting new designs. I'm curious, like, maybe it's a good question. We talked about earlier about learning from other designs, other DePIN designs. whether it be incentive design or whether it be hardware design and rollout. Like, I'm curious if you guys have any big points to make as far as that's concerned from recent memory and learnings of the last 2 years.
And for the audience that doesn't know, the group here has probably been around DePIN amongst like the earliest, basically since its inception. So I think we have some good perspectives here.
Go ahead, Russ. I've been talking too much.
I was going to say before Masari made it famous.
Yeah.
Coined the term. Make us feel old after a couple of years very quickly. So I think honestly the incentives kind of mirror the market right now. In the current market, guaranteed incentives of ROI and payouts, it's very non-speculative right now because things that float, everyone's worried instead of how low it will go versus how high it will go. The sentiment's changed. But I think that's going to change. I think it's going to change in about a year and a half. And it's going to flip and go back to, hey, more of, no, I don't want to miss out. I want a set of mechanisms that, have a lot of upward trajectory and float more. So I know, even in some of my own calculations of working with, projects in the space, the ones now that don't float as much are a little more attractive in some cases. But I've seen, pretty much anything that can sell off pretty much has for the most part. There may be some stuff you might say Demo and is doing pretty well. It's not down 98%, that kind of stuff. But as far as, if you want to start talking about mechanics, I'd like to get back to kind of what is the source of revenue for these networks is really, really important too. Like, what is your plan to go to market and actually get revenue? And is that a realistic plan? We're playing all this time playing around with incentive mechanisms, white papers, and changing rules and doing all this stuff, like moving around all these chairs around different hardware incentive mechanisms instead of saying, how do we get more customers? How do we make this a usable service that competes in the market and gets real revenue, provides real value? Regardless of the token incentives, how are we getting revenue through the door? And is that revenue appropriately linked to whatever tokens that you're getting? I think is something neat. Now that's a little bit old school. The strict approach to that is like you don't have a bite of customer traffic, you don't make any revenue. Is the old school way of dealing with that.
Yeah.
That was kind of the ultimate way of handling that issue. But proof of coverage says no, your coverage has value even if nobody is using it for now, or until a point to maybe we change it around to where more and more of this is taken up by actual data traffic. But I think there's slowly this, I don't want to call it maturity or evolution to say, no, actual data that's generated by customers, ultimately matters and will ultimately determine the success or failure of a project, not how much hardware you sell or how you sell it, what the token incentives are, but the number of actual customers, not people in the project as customers, but actually people who have no idea you even exist who end up using and becoming a customer of your services. We talk about things like there's, around the GeoNet space, there's space weather, really hyper accurate positioning data. People want to buy that type of data. Obviously it's cellular. Everyone's got a cell phone. We've got customers everywhere. We just got to figure out how to deliver it to them in a way that's easy for them to use and saves everybody money, which I think, is a huge opportunity in the space we're still figuring out. But the other projects, we're in, it's really kind of, I've really gotten more perspective over the last month working with people in projects outside of DePIN or what we'll call, maybe wireless DePIN that are still doing GPU mining, that are big into storage, the stuff I don't really pay any attention to. People are into like music, using music NFTs, using that to license the rights to independent artists and turn that to a revenue stream and taking that from a fiat to actually a token revenue stream and making that seamless through contracts. And I was like, wow, this is amazing stuff that's really far outside of what we do. So this kind of, comes up nice because we're going to be talking at a conference this Saturday, and it's going to be a lot of people who are from the other parts of the whole crypto universe who have no idea we even exist. But after finding out we're here, may actually want to work with us and help us and say, I know somebody, I might have some good locations. Maybe I'll work with one of you, or maybe I'll learn more about this. And naturally what we're seeing too is there's a lot of demand for guides, for trusted guides who are giving out good information that people can rely upon. And they're not going to be misled or taken advantage of by buying hardware that they don't need or that it's overpriced, or it's gonna, as soon as they buy it, it's not going to move as much as they expected within a couple of months. So I think we've seen an incredible demand for services like Who Loves Burrito doing transparent as possible ROI rankings of how they work. So this is something that I think we're going to be talking about on Saturday here at the E3 in Chicago.
Yep, exactly. I had to pull it up for you guys to chill it.
Yeah, to butt in before Russ completely takes my point. No, everything he just said is I think top of the line. Definitely that immediate usage of any network of the service that you're providing. I like to take it from another standpoint, but the people participating that are providing the service are not necessarily, the customer, but those of us who stand up the hardware. How do you keep the community as engaged as possible from the very beginning when they're excited, and keep them around at least long enough to understand the mechanics of how things operate? Why do rewards work in this manner? How are setting up my hardware going to be most optimal for the service that I'm going to provide? Who's the target customer of these services that I'm providing? And you try to just give them as much information as possible. And that those are going to be the same people who are on Reddit, the Facebook groups, which are a cesspool. They're going to be on the other forums in the Discord, fighting the FUD, but also educating other users, spreading, in a sense, a good word, getting just little by little educating everyone else, and you get a positive spread of information rather than a just constant swirl of FUD anytime something negative is posted. But it's a great opportunity for so many people to get their feet wet with technical information. If you're doing any sort of decentralized compute, or some of these other projects with Raspberry Pis, yeah, that's a great time for them to start learning Linux. And uh, those of us who are into the technical field, we know how much of a struggle session it is when you first begin to study that stuff. But when you're excited over a project like this, like when you have a reason to learn it, it comes much easier, and it becomes much more habitual to learn those very basic steps that are just hell for the beginner. So that's the approach I like to take. If I can make, for example, I just made a Linux guide, just the very basic stuff for Crank, for their community, people who want to troubleshoot their Raspberry Pi hotspots. That gives them the basic commands to look at the logs, look at certain features on there, tweak certain features, etc. Just basic stuff like that. That I know a couple people who maybe aren't so technical, they're going to repeatedly do those, and 2-3 years from now, they might be one of those very sharp killer developers that you want. One of the community contributors that you want on your team, and they learned it all by themselves. Now they have some sort of I always lose the word I'm looking for, but they now are contributing to your project just because that's where they learned it, and they feel a sense of community, and I don't know, in debt. I forget the word I'm looking for, loyalty, but that's my thoughts.
Yeah, DePIN is unique amongst these projects because I think the level of like fanaticism of the community is kind of scales according to the level of commitment that the community has given, right? And if you're like assembling hardware and you're like typing commands for the first time, and like maybe you're climbing a roof, that's like a high level of commitment. And I think you see a resultingly high level of commitment to a community and the involvement. So DePIN's cool for exposing a ton of people to new concepts and ideas and methodologies for the first time. Myself included, picked up a few new tricks along the way. And it was a lot of familiar territory, but a lot of new stuff as well. I think that's a really cool point.
Let me tell you, I've learned more in these last 3 years in the crypto space when it applies to my career than I did in 3 years of being on the job, maybe with the exception of when I was in the military. The first 3 years I was learning everything. I got to see so much from the standpoint that I don't get to on a typical day-to-day basis working. So I work with Cisco primarily, and I'll work with servers, the system side, cloud, whatever. But I didn't work with Linux to the extent that I do. Didn't work with code to the extent that I do now. I didn't see the other side of wireless communications. So it opened my eyes to so much, and to know that it's just there's people out there who are hungry to learn this stuff, but to treat them as if they're, and I've seen this in some projects, unfortunately, but to treat them as if they're like a nuisance. Well, yes, it's going to be annoying to explain this thing to people over and over, but eventually they're going to get it and they're going to want to contribute in a positive, meaningful way. And that just makes it better as a community. And one day they might just be good enough where they're showing you things you didn't think of. They're bringing you the good ideas because they feel that, because you mentored them and helped them, they feel indebted or some way, or they want to give back, which I find to be, that's pretty heartwarming.
Yeah. Comes full circle, comes back to you like that. Well, how about, guys, we bring it home here? I got to bounce in a little bit. What should we end off with? Any ideas?
I would say some hot takes from these two.
Yeah, there's no shortage.
Against DePIN, DY.
This has been less spicy, but I know you guys have some spicy thoughts.
All right, I'll pitch one to you. So we always talk about this. Well, I guess when we think of XNET, we're talking about the clustering, the incentivized areas, the targeted areas, right? And I always try to make the point or the case for both sides. Let's say that maybe I do have neighbors who are sick of our local ISP. Our connectivity sucks for whatever reason, and I could provide the service, but I'm not within one of those hexes, the silver or gold hexes. I know where I can beam internet from. I could provide that service. That's always like the counter argument I have. So I'm not in favor of putting, a CBRS gateway up just at random because, I have a good location and, I could earn. I'm not really for giving the bootstrapping type of rewards, the proof of coverage rewards, if you will, to people who can just shove one up in any area. But if someone has an area that is not within an incentivized location, but will see mass utilization, they probably should earn on par with the amount of data consumption that there is. So that's the one argument I make against clusters. It still has to, there still has to be utility there. Like I said, if you're just throwing them up, outside on my house because I have a good easy roof to climb on, but no neighbors within sight, I don't believe in those, the bootstrapping type rewards. But
yeah, and that kind of gets to the heart of why the cluster is designed the way it is. And I guess before we we always make this offer if you're in a position where you've got a lot of real estate close by and we can stitch something together, it's a usable footprint. That's an opportunity to redefine what that area incentive looks like. So nothing's locked and frozen in stone here. But I think, the equipment should still be functional outside of one of these zones. But, the cluster is also kind of a statement. It's also a statement piece in a sense. It's a statement about what XNet's about. Even though the clusters can be redefined, they can move, they can appear and disappear, right? But it's a statement that, no, we're not here to sell equipment to any old person who thinks this is like a lottery ticket. I'm sure XNet would sell a lot more gear if everything was open and eligible, but it's not. And so it's a statement piece as much as it is a functional design criteria.
And obviously, in functionality wise, in terms of demand, XNet's gone with kind of the higher end projections of where we think there will be the most data. But I think Tom said it. One of our execs, like, if you look over the U.S., there's like thousands of pockets of clusters that have shitty coverage, or maybe one carrier is lacking. So the opportunity is massive. It's not just the 4 or 5 clusters we have. It's just, I guess it's a challenge, right? I mean, you guys are kind of more the deployers. You guys probably understand.
I can definitely speak to that from my time at Verizon Wireless. In every major city, there's dead zones that that they're losing customers over. People are complaining about. The local store owner, store managers have complaining they'd hit their quota just if this neighborhood had better service. It's actually a problem in the industry that's been around quite some time. The issue has been the reason why there's no coverage in that area is usually because the HOA is blocking all tower builds, blocking putting up equipment. So that's actually an area that I think, the XNET's approach is really well suited to solve and say, we're going to crack these hard areas with the right incentives. We're going to follow all the rules, but we're going to actually allow them to have coverage and allow them to use their current carrier completely invisibly. They have no idea they're even going through XNET's radios. That's what we want. We want to provide such a high quality of service. They have no idea that they're a Verizon customer going through XNET or a T-Mobile or an AT&T. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is that they have good service and the customer is happy. So, and data flows when people are happy, and and those data flows mean money. So, the more data, the better. And data is, infinite data is always on the future of where things are going. But talk about this. There's one thing, Steve, you mentioned here about decentralized networks where people have the freedom, kind of join a project. I'd say another kind of law of, just the environment or the law of projects. People have a right to leave. But on top of that, I think putting any type of technical, or processes in front of preventing people to leave from a project are really mostly wasted time and effort. We've got really smart people here who can get through any technical obstacle that's out there. I'm actually waiting for someone to put together like a hackathon of how many things you can put on like an old Helium Raspberry Pi. I think we're up to almost a dozen projects you can put on a Raspberry Pi. And you can load those suckers up to where they're smoking. Like you got to put a fan on it because it's it's getting as hot as it can.
That's funny.
I think it'd be a fun hackathon. How many projects can you get to run? Now they might not work optimally, but they're all earning and they're all running. It's been kind of a fun little project. Joe and I have been chatting about and how to technically do it. And because there's so many people from so many parts of DePIN, so many projects I didn't even know about. And I thought, I try to keep track of all that I can, but there's dozens and dozens of projects.
I don't always, what? I like the idea, but I try not to give any advice on it because then I become the guy who everyone asks all the questions to. And it just becomes too much. I'll be a personal service desk for everyone 24/7 if I was to give away all that information. But no, there's a few ones out there I have technical videos on, and those swamp plenty of my evenings with questions.
Yeah. Hear that. But Russ, it's a good point. I think the mobile industry, one of the hallmarks is vendor and supplier lock-in, right? And it's like, no, you can't leave even if you wanted to, right? It's like, and it permeates the entire industry, both from your cellular plans and the way you use your mobile device, all the way to the radios and the towers and the equipment. And so it's all a game of lock-in. Mm-hmm. And so there's cool movements, even the Open RAN type movements about creating unified standards. It's very cool, right? I think it ideologically aligns.
One point I kind of want to I guess since the helium was brought up, and I'm not in any ways trying to take pot shots at them. This is something that I've talked to IoT LoRaWAN professionals about, and there was a lot of interest amongst the LoRaWAN crowd early on, but they did not like the idea of having to buy a manufacturer preferred or one of the manufacturer oversight committee approved type of device when they had many of their own. They just wanted to be able to put theirs on the Helium network. And that was a massive turnoff in the beginning, where when you're seeing other ones like, for example, Things IX come along or Crank, where you can just use hardware agnostic LoRaWAN gateways. It can be an already manufactured one, a do-it-yourself one, or a previously Helium approved one. Now that's gaining that interest and traction from a lot of these LoRaWAN professionals, again, knowing that they don't have to buy new hardware to participate. They don't even have to participate in the proof of coverage aspects of it, whether it be the mapping or buying a license to participate. They can just throw theirs on the network and use the network, and they are appreciated for using the network.
Yeah, that's true. Removing some barriers to entry.
Mm-hmm. That also comes with headaches of their own when it comes to vendor interoperability and how you come up with that hardware agnostic system that cannot be gamed, because we're seeing even in the GNSS space that's an issue when it comes to using just any off the shelf a GNSS hardware for its basically what they're doing in projects like Onakoi and GeoNet is that another reference point for that sub-centimeter accuracy on GNSS. Those, I'm told by numerous people, that can be gamed as well, the data that you're providing there. So it's always, it's always a there's always more to the argument in every case, but in the vast majority of situations when it comes to proprietary hardware, we've never seen it completely deter the cheating of the system.
That's a good point. I mean, a lot of this stuff was constructed with not even considering an economic incentive to have a false GPS signal. Like, why would you want to like falsify that? It doesn't make any sense. That was the thing in its inception. And so I hope I think success of DePIN means that's more front and center.
I think success of cellular DePIN was Apple. Apple, I think a long time ago, said that their dream was to have people have no idea what network they're on when they use their iPhone. They just use whatever network is available according to really how affordable and how well it performs. It shouldn't matter at all, and they just pay a price. And, I'm hoping, kind of that dream comes true to where they end up being actually a big supporter of this and start working with a project. Hopefully it would be XNET first. There's, working with the entire space and saying, we save money for our customers when we use your network. We're going to start preferring your network if we see good quality signal. I think that overnight could just completely, change how people think about this space and go, wow, if Apple's doing it, it's got to be good. Now, of course, they're going to have strict requirements. So that's why you got to hold yourself to a very high bar of what is a good network that they're going to jump onto. And, that's what I think is I don't know if that'll be the 0 to 1 moment. We're hoping, I think a lot's going to happen with more and more big network partnerships is going to help a lot. I think with more and more license coverage, license spectrum being shared, that's going to do a lot. But I think once we get, major handset manufacturing, I don't see it being, unfortunately, probably Google, although I'd love them to be first, or Samsung. I think it's going to be Apple that'll probably say, we're going to give this a shot. We're going to try something really different. Because they were the first ones who stood up to the carriers when they said, you will not be able to put whatever you want on someone's phone. We're going to decrapify it from the factory.
Also getting rid of physical SIM mostly.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking about that, Russ, when you talked about Apple. Like the number of eSIMs. Joe, you were also talking about being kind of hardware agnostic. I think Apple is moving towards being, as you said, Russ, network agnostic. So you can have up to 8 networks if you want, You can have 8 eSIMs in there if you want.
Yeah, remove that stupid point of control.
Well, just make it Apple is your carrier. What do I use? I use Apple. I don't know what it is. It's just Apple. I just take care. I don't care.
Coming soon. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
No, but it always blew me away the amount. Like I worked on phones for many years, and like the amount of space a SIM card takes up. It's mostly stupid plastic and little contact pads versus the level of sophistication engineering that goes into an equal amount of space, just a few millimeters away. And it was just like the dumbest thing ever. Get rid of it, please, as fast as you can. But carriers love it. It's how they control you. Well, maybe on that note, why do we with a nice little jab at the TradY call it here?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. So, guys, you heard it here first. XNET is officially under a partnership with, and it'll be the 0 to 1 moment with DePIN.
Gentlemen, thanks for having us.